The radar screen flickered in the pre-dawn darkness of the USS Constellation's Combat Information Center, its green glow casting eerie shadows across the faces of the watch officers. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb squinted at the anomaly, a single blip moving at impossible speed through the contested waters off the Makran coast. The signature was wrong, too clean, too deliberate for commercial traffic, yet too bold for insurgent vessels that typically hug the coastline like frightened mice. "Sir, we've got a surface contact bearing 270, range 43 nautical miles," reported Petty Officer First Class Rodriguez, his voice carrying the practiced calm of a sailor who'd seen too many false alarms turn deadly. The blip pulsed steadily, cutting through international waters with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Webb moved closer to the console, his coffee growing cold in his weathered hands. 3 months into Operation Sentinel Freedom, they'd intercepted 17 suspected weapons shipments, each one leading nowhere, each one another dead end in a war that seemed to exist only in the shadows between nations. But this contact felt different. It moved with purpose, maintaining course despite the obvious presence of American naval assets. "Contact is maintaining bearing and speed, sir. Estimated time to territorial waters, 27 minutes." The ship's intelligence officer, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, emerged from the adjacent briefing room, her arms full of classified folders that had consumed her attention for the past 6 hours. "Commander, if this is what I think it is, we've got about 20 minutes before they're beyond our interdiction range." Webb nodded grimly. The rules of engagement were clear, but the political ramifications of another incident in these waters could destabilize the entire region. Every decision carried weight that extended far beyond the steel hull of their destroyer. "Prep the boarding party," Webb ordered, his voice cutting through the ambient hum of electronics. "And get me a pilot." What neither Webb nor his crew knew was that 18 hours earlier, in a converted hangar outside Ramstein Air Base, Captain Lydia "Ghost" Nakamura had been studying the same intelligence reports that now filled Chen's folders. The daughter of a Korean War veteran and a woman who'd learned to fly before she'd learned to drive, Nakamura had built her reputation on missions that officially never happened. Her FA-18E Super Hornet sat in the hangar like a predator at rest, its sleek gray form bearing the scars of 12 combat deployments. The aircraft's radar-absorbent coating gave it an almost supernatural appearance in the fluorescent lighting, as if it existed somewhere between the physical world and the realm of shadows where modern warfare was increasingly fought. Tomorrow, she would discover that some missions choose their pilots, rather than the other way around. The morning briefing at 400 hours felt different from the moment Ghost stepped into the sterile conference room. Colonel James "Rattlesnake" Morrison, a man whose face bore the weathered lines of someone who'd spent too many years staring into hostile skis, stood before a wall-mounted display showing satellite imagery of the Arabian Sea. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation developing in the Persian Gulf that requires immediate attention," Morrison began, his Texas drawl carrying the weight of classified intelligence that had crossed his desk at 200. "Intelligence suggests a high-value target is moving weapons-grade material through international waters." Ghost sat in the second row, her flight suit crisp despite the early hour. Around her, 8 other naval aviators absorbed the briefing with the focused attention of professionals who understood that details meant the difference between mission success and front-page headlines. The room smelled of coffee and the particular tension that preceded combat operations. "Captain Nakamura," Morrison's voice cut through her concentration, "you'll be flying top cover for the interdiction team. Your job is to provide overwatch and, if necessary, ensure that vessel doesn't reach Iranian territorial waters." She nodded, already running through the tactical scenarios in her mind. The Super Hornet's advanced radar systems would give her a god's-eye view of the operation, but something about the mission profile felt incomplete. Intelligence gaps were nothing new, but the briefing had glossed over several critical details that would normally be front and center. "Sir, what's the threat assessment for air support?" asked Lieutenant Commander Jake Viper Harrison, her wingman for the past 2 years. His question voiced what several pilots were thinking. Interdiction operations rarely required fighter cover unless someone expected trouble. Morrison's pause lasted a fraction too long. "Current intelligence suggests minimal air threat, but we're not taking chances. The region has been increasingly active with unidentified aircraft operating out of mobile bases." Ghost felt the familiar pre-mission tension building in her chest, the same sensation she'd experienced before every combat sortie since her first deployment to Afghanistan 8 years ago. Her father had called it combat intuition, the ability to sense when a mission was more dangerous than the briefing suggested. The satellite imagery shifted to show their target area, a stretch of open water that looked deceptively peaceful from space. But Ghost knew that beneath the surface, submarines might be lurking, and above it, the clear blue sky could hide threats that wouldn't appear on radar until it was too late. "Weather is clear, visibility unlimited," Morrison continued. "Launch time is 5:30 hours. Any questions?" The room remained silent, each pilot mentally rehearsing their assigned roles. Ghost's mind was already in the cockpit, running through pre-flight procedures that had become second nature after 3,000 flight hours. The pre-dawn flight deck of the USS Constellation hummed with controlled chaos as Ghost performed her final walk-around inspection. Her Super Hornet, tail number 114, gleamed under the deck lights, its weapons pylons loaded with air-to-air missiles that she hoped would remain unused. The aircraft represented the cutting edge of American military technology, but in Ghost's hands, it was something more, an extension of her will, a tool refined through years of training and combat experience. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez approached with her final maintenance report. "She's ready to fly, Captain. All systems green, fuel topped off, and your ECM pods are loaded with the latest countermeasures." Ghost nodded, accepting the tablet and signing off on the aircraft's status. The electronic warfare pods would be crucial if they encountered hostile radar systems, but their presence suggested that intelligence expected more resistance than they'd briefed. "Thanks, Chief. Keep an eye on the weather reports. I've got a feeling this one might get interesting." As she climbed into the cockpit, Ghost felt the familiar embrace of the ejection seat and the complex array of switches and displays that surrounded her. The Super Hornet's cockpit was a masterpiece of ergonomic design, every control positioned exactly where her hands expected to find it. She began the startup sequence, feeling the twin engines spool to life with a low rumble that vibrated through the aircraft's frame. The radio crackled to life with the voice of the air traffic control officer. "Ghost, you're cleared for takeoff. Winds are light and variable, visibility unlimited. Safe hunting." "Copy that, tower. Ghost is rolling." The catapult launch compressed her entire world into 4 seconds of controlled violence. The Super Hornet accelerated from 0 to 165 knots in the length of a football field, pressing her back into the seat with 3 times the force of gravity. Then, suddenly, she was airborne, climbing into the pearl-gray sky of dawn with the confidence of someone who'd made this transition between Earth and sky hundreds of times before. Below, the USS Constellation shrank to a gray speck on the dark water, while ahead, the mission that would define her career waited in the growing light of morning. Ghost didn't know it yet, but she was flying toward a confrontation that would test every skill she'd learned and every instinct she'd developed. The tactical frequency buzzed with routine communications as Ghost leveled off at 25,000 feet, her aircraft's radar painting a picture of the battlespace below. The interdiction team was already in position, their rigid inflatable boats appearing as tiny blips on her display. Everything appeared normal, textbook even, but the nagging sensation in her chest suggested otherwise. Constellation, this is Ghost, on station and ready to provide overwatch. Copy Ghost, the party is about to begin. Ghost's radar display suddenly bloomed with new contacts, three fast-moving aircraft approaching from the northeast at high altitude. The signatures were unfamiliar, not matching any known commercial or military aircraft in the region. Her finger moved instinctively to the weapons selector switch as her training kicked in. Constellation Ghost. I'm showing three unidentified aircraft, bearing 045, range 60 miles and closing fast. They're not squawking transponder codes. The radio silence that followed lasted 3 heartbeats too long. When the response came, it carried a tension that hadn't been there moments before. Ghost, you are cleared to investigate and report. Use extreme caution. Rules of engagement are weapons tight unless fired upon. Ghost banked toward the approaching contacts, her radar warning receiver remaining silent. Whatever these aircraft were, they weren't actively scanning with radar, which suggested either sophisticated stealth technology or a level of confidence that bordered on arrogance. The Super Hornet's advanced sensors painted a clearer picture as she closed the distance, three aircraft in loose formation, flying at nearly 50,000 feet. Constellation Ghost. The bogies are maintaining course and speed. I'm unable to identify aircraft type from this range, but they're definitely military. Recommend scrambling additional air support. Negative Ghost. Continue monitoring. Do not engage unless directly threatened. The command structure's reluctance to escalate worried her more than the unidentified aircraft. In her experience, when commanders hesitated to commit resources, it usually meant they knew something that hadn't made it into the operational briefing. Ghost adjusted her intercept course, climbing to match the bogey's altitude while maintaining a safe distance. The Super Hornet's engines responded eagerly to her throttle inputs, pushing her higher into the thin air where few aircraft could operate effectively. At this altitude, she was entering a realm where the margin for error disappeared entirely. A single mistake could result in a stall that would take thousands of feet to recover from. Constellation Ghost. I'm at 45,000 and climbing. The bogies are still maintaining course toward the interdiction zone. The response came immediately this time, carrying an urgency that made Ghost's pulse quicken. Ghost, abort intercept. Return to patrol station immediately. But it was too late. The lead aircraft had already begun its descent, and Ghost realized with growing alarm that she was about to witness something that would change everything. The lead aircraft revealed itself as it descended through 40,000 feet, a sleek, angular design that Ghost had never seen before, its surfaces seeming to absorb rather than reflect the morning sunlight. The aircraft moved with an unnatural grace, its flight characteristics suggesting technology that shouldn't exist, at least not in any intelligence briefing she'd received. Constellation Ghost, you need to see this. The lead aircraft is. It's not in any recognition manual I've studied. The design is completely foreign. Ghost's radar warning receiver suddenly erupted in a cascade of alerts. The unknown aircraft was painting her with multiple targeting radars, their signals unlike anything in her electronic warfare database. The Super Hornet's defensive systems struggled to categorize the threat, flashing warnings that made her blood run cold. Ghost, you are ordered to disengage immediately. Return to base. But Ghost had already seen too much. The lead aircraft was diving toward the surface, its two wingmen maintaining high cover in a tactical formation that spoke of combat experience and advanced training. This wasn't a reconnaissance mission. It was a strike operation, and she was the only thing standing between the interdiction team and whatever these aircraft intended to do. Her finger found the weapons selector switch, cycling through her available armament. 4 AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles, 2 AIM-9 Sidewinders, and a full load of 20 cannon ammunition. Against unknown aircraft with unknown capabilities, it might not be enough, but it was all she had. Constellation Ghost. I'm being targeted by multiple fire control radars. The bogies are descending toward the interdiction zone. I need immediate instructions. The radio crackled with static, then fell silent. Ghost realized with growing dread that she was on her own, 45,000 feet above hostile waters, facing an enemy that officially didn't exist. The lead aircraft's dive steepened, its target now clearly the American naval vessels below. Ghost made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her career. She rolled inverted and pulled the Super Hornet into a screaming dive, chasing the unknown aircraft toward the surface at nearly the speed of sound. Ghost's HUD display painted a picture of controlled chaos as she dove through 30,000 feet, her Super Hornet's airframe groaning under the stress of the high-speed descent. The unknown aircraft ahead of her moved with an almost liquid grace, its unconventional design allowing it to maneuver in ways that seemed to defy physics. Her radar struggled to maintain lock as the bogie executed a series of impossible turns, each one bleeding off speed without the expected energy loss. Constellation Ghost. The lead bogie is approaching the interdiction zone. I'm pursuing, but this aircraft has performance characteristics beyond anything in our intelligence files. Static filled her headset where a response should have been. Either her communications were being jammed, or the command structure was deliberately maintaining radio silence. Neither possibility offered comfort as she watched the unknown aircraft level off at 5,000 feet, directly above the small flotilla of American vessels. Ghost's thumb hovered over the weapon's release button. The AIM-120 AMRAAM had a high probability of kill against any known aircraft, but she had no way to predict how effective it would be against this technology. The missile's active radar seeker might not even recognize the target, given the aircraft's unusual radar signature. The bogie suddenly pitched up into a sharp climbing turn, revealing its underside to Ghost sensors for the first time. What she saw made her heart skip: multiple weapons bays, their doors beginning to open in preparation for an attack run. The aircraft was preparing to engage the interdiction team, and she was the only thing standing between them and disaster. Ghost to any station, Ghost to any station. I have a hostile aircraft with weapons bay doors opening, preparing to engage friendly forces. Request immediate guidance. Her radio remained silent, but her radar warning receiver screamed as the aircraft ahead of her activated its own targeting systems. The Super Hornet's defensive countermeasures automatically began dispensing chaff and flares, filling the air around her with metallic particles designed to confuse incoming missiles. Ghost had run out of time for hesitation. Her training took over, muscle memory guiding her hands as she selected an AIM-120 and waited for the missile seeker to achieve lock. The tone in her headset changed pitch, indicating target acquisition, and she squeezed the trigger. Fox 3, AMRAAM in flight. The missile streaked away from her aircraft, its solid rocket motor leaving a thin trail of smoke as it accelerated toward the unknown aircraft. Ghost watched her display intently, tracking the missile's progress as it closed the distance at 3 times the speed of sound. The impact should have been devastating. Instead, the unknown aircraft seemed to shimmer and fade, the missile passing harmlessly through empty air before self-destructing at the end of its programmed flight path. Ghost blinked, certain her eyes were playing tricks on her, but her radar confirmed what seemed impossible. The aircraft had somehow avoided the missile without any visible evasive maneuver. "That's not possible," she whispered into her mask, her voice barely audible above the roar of her engines. The unknown aircraft completed its turn and dove toward the surface, its weapons bays now fully open. Ghost could see ordnance being released, small dark objects that fell toward the interdiction team with lethal precision. She was witnessing an attack on American forces, and every second of hesitation meant more lives at risk. Ghost pushed her throttles to full afterburner and rolled into a pursuit curve, her aircraft's twin engines producing a combined 50,000 pounds of thrust. The Super Hornet accelerated past the speed of sound, its shock wave creating a sonic boom that would be heard for miles. She was committed now, regardless of the consequences. The first explosion on the surface told Ghost everything she needed to know. The interdiction team was under attack, and she was their only hope of survival. Whatever technology she was facing, whatever political considerations were keeping her command structure silent, none of it mattered now. American sailors were dying, and she had the training and equipment to stop it. Ghost selected her second AIM-120 and began the process of achieving missile lock. This time, she would lead the target, anticipating its movement patterns based on her observations of its previous maneuvers. The aircraft might have some form of advanced stealth technology, but it still had to obey the laws of physics. The bogey continued its attack run, releasing more ordnance toward the ships below. Ghost could see secondary explosions beginning to bloom on the surface, marking the locations where American vessels were fighting for their lives. The sight filled her with a cold rage that cut through her tactical training like a blade. "Not on my watch," she said through gritted teeth, her finger tightening on the trigger. The unknown aircraft's evasive maneuvers became more aggressive as Ghost closed the distance. It rolled into a series of high-G turns that should have caused any human pilot to lose consciousness, but it maintained perfect control throughout the entire sequence. Ghost realized with growing dread that she might not be facing a human opponent at all. Her second missile missed by an even wider margin, the unknown aircraft seeming to anticipate the shot before she'd even fired. Ghost's tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. She was down to 2 long-range missiles, and the enemy aircraft was demonstrating capabilities that her training had never prepared her for. The surface battle was intensifying. Ghost could see tracer rounds reaching up from the ships below, their crews fighting desperately against an enemy they couldn't fully see or understand. The interdiction team's boats were scattered, some burning, others racing for the protection of the larger vessels. The operation had become a disaster, and she was the only air asset in position to prevent it from becoming a massacre. Ghost made a decision that would define the rest of her career. She selected her third AIM-120, but instead of firing immediately, she began a high-speed diving attack that would bring her within close-range missile distance. The AIM-9 Sidewinder was an older design, but its infrared seeker might be more effective against this unconventional target. The unknown aircraft suddenly changed tactics, abandoning its attack run to engage Ghost directly. It climbed rapidly, its unconventional design allowing it to gain altitude at a rate that her Super Hornet couldn't match. Ghost found herself looking up at an enemy that held both the tactical and technological advantage. Her radar warning receiver reached a new level of urgency as the aircraft above her activated weapons systems that didn't match any known threat in her database. Ghost realized that she was about to experience combat unlike anything in her training, against an enemy that challenged every assumption about modern warfare. The first missile launch from the unknown aircraft appeared on her display as a streak of light descending from above. Ghost's defensive systems engaged automatically, dispensing countermeasures while she rolled into a series of evasive maneuvers designed to break the incoming missile's lock. The Super Hornet's airframe groaned under the stress of the high-G turns, but held together as she dove toward the surface. The missile that was tracking her behaved unlike any weapon she'd encountered. Instead of following a predictable ballistic trajectory, it seemed to adjust its course continuously, adapting to her evasive maneuvers with an intelligence that suggested advanced guidance systems. Ghost realized she was facing technology that might be decades ahead of anything in the American arsenal. "Constellation, Ghost. I'm under attack by unknown aircraft with advanced capabilities. I need immediate support." Static filled her headset, but she thought she heard fragments of voice communication beneath the interference. Someone was trying to reach her, but the signal was too distorted to understand. Ghost was effectively alone, 40,000 feet above hostile waters, facing an enemy that seemed to possess technology from a different era. The incoming missile detonated 50 feet behind her aircraft, its proximity fuse triggered by the Super Hornet's radar signature. The explosion sent shrapnel through her port engine, causing warning lights to illuminate across her instrument panel. Ghost felt the aircraft lurch as the damaged engine began to lose power, its steady roar replaced by an irregular grinding sound that spoke of internal damage. "Engine fire, port side," she announced to no one, her voice steady despite the crisis. Emergency procedures took over, her hands moving through the engine shutdown sequence while she assessed her tactical situation. The Super Hornet could fly on one engine, but her performance was now severely degraded. The unknown aircraft was positioning itself for another attack run, its unusual design clearly visible against the morning sky. Ghost realized that her conventional tactics were useless against this opponent. She needed to think outside the parameters of her training, to find a weakness in technology that seemed invincible. Ghost's damaged Super Hornet limped through the sky at reduced power, her remaining engine struggling to maintain altitude against the constant pull of gravity. The unknown aircraft circled her like a predator, its pilot seemingly content to observe her distress rather than finish her off immediately. The tactical pause gave Ghost time to study her opponent more carefully, looking for any detail that might provide an advantage. The aircraft's design was angular and aggressive, with control surfaces that seemed to blend seamlessly into its overall shape. But as Ghost watched, she noticed something that her training had taught her to recognize: the subtle variations in the aircraft's movement that indicated a pilot rather than an automated system. Whatever technology she was facing, it still required human input to function effectively. "If you're human, you can make mistakes," Ghost whispered to herself, her voice barely audible above the labored sound of her remaining engine. The unknown aircraft began another attack run, diving toward Ghost's position with weapons bay doors opening. This time, Ghost was ready. Instead of attempting to evade, she rolled her aircraft toward the incoming threat, presenting the smallest possible target profile while positioning herself for a desperate counterattack. The AIM-9 Sidewinder required close range to be effective, but its infrared seeker was designed to track heat signatures rather than radar returns. Ghost waited until the bogey was less than a mile away before firing, the missile's distinctive growl filling her headset as it achieved target lock. Fox 2, Sidewinder in flight." The missile streaked toward the unknown aircraft, its seeker head tracking the heat signature of the enemy's engines. For a moment, Ghost allowed herself to hope that this conventional weapon might succeed where the more advanced AIM-120 had failed. The Sidewinder was a proven design, responsible for more air-to-air kills than any other American missile. The unknown aircraft's response was immediate and devastating. It released a cloud of countermeasures that seemed to absorb the missile's infrared energy, creating a thermal signature so intense that the Sidewinder's seeker was completely overwhelmed. The missile veered off course, chasing a false target until its fuel was exhausted. Ghost's tactical situation had become hopeless. She was down to her last two missiles, her aircraft was operating at reduced capability, and her enemy had demonstrated technology that seemed to counter every weapon in her arsenal. But American sailors were still fighting for their lives on the surface below, and she was their only protection. The unknown aircraft completed its turn and began climbing, positioning itself for what Ghost recognized as a final attack run. She had perhaps 30 seconds before the enemy would be in optimal firing position, 30 seconds to find a solution to an impossible problem. Ghost's eyes fell on her fuel gauge, noting the thousands of pounds of JP-8 jet fuel that filled her aircraft's tanks. The Super Hornet was essentially a flying bomb, its fuel load carrying enough energy to level a city block. If she couldn't defeat the enemy aircraft with conventional weapons, perhaps she could use her own aircraft as a weapon. Constellation Ghost. If anyone can hear this, tell my father that I flew like he taught me. Ghost pushed her throttle to full afterburner, her damaged engine responding with a surge of power that sent warning lights cascading across her display. The Super Hornet accelerated toward the unknown aircraft, its pilot committed to a course of action that would almost certainly result in her death. The bogey's pilot seemed to recognize the threat, attempting to maneuver away from Ghost's suicide run. But the unknown aircraft's superior performance was also its weakness. It was designed for high-altitude operations, and at this lower altitude, its maneuverability was reduced. Ghost had finally found an advantage, however brief. The two aircraft closed at a combined speed of over 1,000 miles per hour, their pilots locked in a deadly game of aerial chicken. Ghost's radar warning receiver screamed as the enemy aircraft fired everything it had, missiles and energy weapons that lit up the sky around her. She flew through the barrage, her aircraft taking hit after hit, held together by determination and the engineering excellence that had built the Super Hornet. At the last possible moment, Ghost made a decision that would save her life and define her legacy. Instead of continuing the collision course, she ejected her last two missiles at point-blank range, then rolled inverted and dove toward the surface. The unknown aircraft, committed to its evasive maneuver, flew directly into the path of both AIM-120s. The double explosion lit up the sky like a miniature sun, the unknown aircraft disintegrating in a fireball that could be seen for miles. Ghost's damaged Super Hornet shuddered as the shock wave passed through it, but held together long enough for her to regain control. "Splash one bogey," she reported, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and relief. "Ghost is Winchester and returning to base." But her victory was short-lived. The two remaining unknown aircraft had broken off their high-altitude patrol and were diving toward her position, their weapons already trained on her crippled fighter. Ghost realized that she had won the battle but might still lose the war. Ghost's damaged Super Hornet limped through the sky as the two remaining bogies closed in from above. Her fuel situation was critical, her port engine was completely dead, and her aircraft's defensive systems were operating at reduced capacity. Every warning light on her instrument panel seemed to be illuminated, creating a Christmas tree of amber and red indicators that spoke of multiple system failures. Constellation Ghost. I'm bingo fuel and under attack by two hostiles. Request immediate assistance. The radio crackled with static, then cleared momentarily to reveal a voice she recognized. Colonel Morrison, calling from the operations center at Ramstein. Ghost, this is Rattlesnake. We've been monitoring your situation. Help is on the way, but you need to survive for another 10 minutes. 10 minutes might as well have been 10 hours given her current tactical situation. The two bogies were positioning themselves for a coordinated attack, their unconventional aircraft moving with the same fluid grace that had made their leader so difficult to engage. Ghost realized that she was about to face the same technology that had nearly killed her, but this time she would face it without the element of surprise. The first attack came from her port side, a missile launch that appeared on her radar as a streak of light. Ghost's countermeasures deployed automatically, but she knew from experience that conventional chaff and flares would be ineffective against these advanced weapons. Instead, she rolled into a diving spiral that took her closer to the surface, using the Earth's radar reflection to mask her signature. The missile followed her down, its seeker head tracking her heat signature with unnerving accuracy. Ghost waited until the last possible moment, then pulled her aircraft into a violent climbing turn that generated enough G-force to make her vision tunnel. The missile, unable to match her maneuver, passed beneath her aircraft and detonated harmlessly in the water below. "One down," Ghost muttered, but her relief was short-lived. The second bogie was already in position for its attack run, and her aircraft's performance was deteriorating with each passing moment. The starboard engine was running hot, its temperature gauge climbing toward the red line that indicated imminent failure. Ghost's tactical display showed something that made her heart race, multiple new contacts approaching from the northeast at high speed. The cavalry was arriving, but they would need time to reach her position. She had to survive long enough for reinforcements to tip the balance in her favor. The second unknown aircraft fired a spread of missiles, their launch signatures appearing on Ghost's display like deadly flowers blooming in the digital sky. She counted at least 4 separate tracks, more ordnance than her damaged aircraft could possibly evade. Ghost realized that she was facing her final moments as a pilot, and the thought filled her with a strange sense of peace. Constellation Ghost, it's been an honor serving with you. But fate had other plans. The approaching reinforcements weren't American aircraft. They were the 2 remaining bogies wingmen, arriving to join the battle. Ghost's radar display suddenly showed 6 unknown aircraft, all converging on her position. She had stumbled into something far larger than a simple interdiction mission. The missile barrage that followed was unlike anything in Ghost's experience. The air around her filled with projectiles that seemed to bend the laws of physics, their trajectories adjusting continuously to compensate for her evasive maneuvers. Her aircraft's defensive systems overloaded, unable to process the sheer volume of incoming threats. Ghost Super Hornet took multiple hits, each impact sending shrapnel through her aircraft's structure. The starboard engine finally failed, its death marked by a grinding sound that she felt through her ejection seat. Warning lights cascaded across her display, and she realized that her aircraft was dying around her. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Ghost is going down. Aircraft is not recoverable. Her hand moved toward the ejection handle, but hesitated. Below her, the interdiction team was still fighting for their lives, their small boats scattered across the surface like toys in a bathtub. If she ejected now, she would be abandoning them to face 6 unknown aircraft with no air cover. Ghost made a decision that would define her legacy. Instead of ejecting, she rolled her dying aircraft toward the nearest bogie, using her remaining momentum to position herself for one final attack. The Super Hornet's 20 cannons still had ammunition, and at close range, even the most advanced aircraft were vulnerable to old-fashioned bullets. The unknown aircraft's pilot seemed to recognize the threat, attempting to evade the damaged Super Hornet's attack run. But Ghost had learned from her previous encounters, leading her target and firing in short, controlled bursts that conserved ammunition while maximizing her chances of a hit. The cannon rounds found their mark, punching through the bogey's unconventional armor and causing a series of secondary explosions that lit up the aircraft's interior. Ghost watched with grim satisfaction as the enemy aircraft began to break apart, its pilot fighting for control as his advanced technology failed him. "Splash 2, Ghost reported, her voice barely audible above the cacophony of alarms filling her cockpit. "Ghost is Winchester and going down." Her aircraft had finally reached the limit of its endurance. The Super Hornet's airframe was breaking apart, its control surfaces no longer responding to her inputs. Ghost realized that she had perhaps seconds before the aircraft became completely uncontrollable. This time, she didn't hesitate. Her hand found the ejection handle and pulled. The ejection sequence lasted less than 2 seconds, but for Ghost, it felt like an eternity. The canopy blew away above her, followed immediately by the violent acceleration of the ejection seat's rocket motor. The force compressed her spine and drove the breath from her lungs, but the seat's sophisticated systems protected her from the worst of the trauma. She separated from the seat at 5,000 feet, her parachute deploying automatically as she fell toward the dark water below. Around her, the air battle continued, but Ghost was no longer a participant. She was now a survivor, dependent on her training and the equipment that would determine whether she lived or died. The water was shockingly cold when she hit, her survival suit providing only minimal protection against the Arabian Sea's winter temperatures. Ghost activated her emergency beacon and began the process of survival, knowing that every decision she made in the next few hours would determine her fate. Above her, the battle raged on, but Ghost had other concerns. She was alone in enemy waters, her aircraft was gone, and her only hope of rescue lay with the same command structure that had sent her into an impossible situation. As she treaded water and watched the sky burn above her, Ghost realized that her real mission was just beginning. The cold water of the Arabian Sea enveloped Ghost like a liquid prison, its temperature dropping her core body heat with each passing moment. Her survival suit was designed for this environment, but she knew that hypothermia would become a factor within hours if she wasn't recovered quickly. The emergency beacon clipped to her survival vest pulsed steadily, broadcasting her location to anyone with the proper equipment to receive it. Ghost's survival training kicked in, muscle memory guiding her through the procedures that had been drilled into her during countless hours of water survival school. She inflated her life raft, a compact device that expanded into a one-person shelter designed to keep her alive in the open ocean. The raft's bright orange color would be visible from aircraft, but it would also make her a target for enemy forces. The air battle above her had shifted, the remaining unknown aircraft regrouping after losing two of their number. Ghost could see their contrails as they circled at high altitude, their pilots undoubtedly searching for her position. Her ejection had been visible, and she had to assume that they knew approximately where she had landed. "This is Ghost on guard frequency," she transmitted on her survival radio, hoping that friendly forces were monitoring the emergency channel. "I'm in the water at approximately 27 degrees north, 61 degrees east. I have 2 confirmed kills and intelligence on unknown aircraft operating in the area." The response came immediately, but not from the source she expected. A voice speaking accented English filled her earpiece, its tone conversational despite the circumstances. "Captain Nakamura, this is Colonel Rashid of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. We monitored your engagement with the unknown aircraft. We have a helicopter en route to your position." Ghost's blood ran cold. The Iranians had been monitoring her communications, which meant they knew her exact location. More importantly, they knew her name and rank, suggesting intelligence capabilities that her briefings hadn't mentioned. She was facing capture by a hostile force, and every second she remained in the water increased the probability of that outcome. "I say again, this is Ghost on guard frequency. Any American units, I am in the water and require immediate assistance." Colonel Rashid's voice returned, carrying a note of amusement that made Ghost's skin crawl. "Captain, your forces are currently engaged with the remaining unknown aircraft. They will not be able to assist you for quite some time. My helicopter will reach your position in approximately 15 minutes." Ghost looked at her equipment, taking inventory of the tools available to her. The survival kit contained basic medical supplies, emergency food and water, and a small knife that would be useless against military forces. Her service pistol had been lost during the ejection sequence, leaving her effectively unarmed. The sound of helicopter rotors began to echo across the water, growing louder with each passing moment. Ghost realized that she was about to face a choice that would define the rest of her life: surrender to enemy forces or attempt to evade capture in the open ocean. Neither option offered much hope of survival. Ghost's training had covered this scenario, but the reality was far more complex than any classroom exercise. She was a naval aviator, not a special operations soldier, and her survival skills were designed for rescue scenarios rather than evasion and escape. The Iranian helicopter would have thermal imaging equipment that would make hiding impossible, and the open ocean offered no concealment. The helicopter appeared on the horizon as a black speck, growing larger with each passing second. Ghost could see that it was a modified Mi-17, its cabin doors open to reveal armed soldiers in desert camouflage. The aircraft approached with the confidence of a force that knew it faced no opposition, its pilot maintaining a steady course toward her position. Ghost made a decision that would haunt her for years to come. Instead of attempting to evade capture, she reached into her survival kit and withdrew a small waterproof container. Inside were items that weren't listed in any official inventory: a miniature camera, a GPS tracker, and a data storage device that contained the electronic signature profiles of the unknown aircraft she'd engaged. Her father had taught her that intelligence was often more valuable than weapons, and Ghost realized that she possessed information that could change the balance of power in the region. The unknown aircraft's capabilities, their formation tactics, and their apparent cooperation with Iranian forces represented intelligence that was worth more than her life. The helicopter settled into a hover 50 feet above her position, its rotor wash creating a whirlpool that threatened to swamp her life raft. A rope ladder descended from the aircraft, followed by two soldiers who rappelled down to her position with practiced efficiency. Ghost recognized the insignia on their uniforms: Quds Force, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's elite special operations unit. Captain Nakamura, the lead soldier, called out in heavily accented English, "You will come with us. Do not resist and you will not be harmed." Ghost raised her hands in surrender, but her mind was already working on the problem of how to protect the intelligence she carried. The GPS tracker was small enough to conceal, but the camera and data storage device would be discovered during any thorough search. She needed to find a way to hide them that wouldn't be detected by conventional search procedures. The soldiers approached her raft with professional competence, their weapons trained on her but their body language suggesting they didn't consider her a significant threat. Ghost realized that this might be her only advantage. They saw her as a downed pilot rather than a potential intelligence asset. "I am Captain Lydia Nakamura, United States Navy," she stated clearly, following the protocols drilled into her during survival training. "I claim the protections of the Geneva Convention." The lead soldier nodded, but his expression suggested that international law would be a secondary consideration. "You will be treated according to your status as a prisoner of war. However, you must understand that your situation is complicated." Ghost was pulled from her raft and secured with plastic restraints that were tight enough to restrict circulation, but not so tight as to cause permanent damage. The soldiers were clearly experienced in handling prisoners, their movements efficient and professional. As they prepared to lift her into the helicopter, Ghost managed to conceal the GPS tracker in a location that would be difficult to find during a routine search. The helicopter's interior was configured for prisoner transport, with bench seats along both sides and attachment points for restraints. Ghost was secured to one of the benches, her survival suit providing minimal protection against the aircraft's vibration and the cold air rushing through the open doors. The soldiers took positions around her, their weapons ready but not actively threatening. Colonel Rashid's voice came through the helicopter's intercom system, his tone conversational despite the circumstances. "Captain, I hope you understand that your capture was not our primary objective. We were responding to the same unknown aircraft that you engaged. Perhaps we have more in common than you realize." Ghost remained silent, following her training to provide only name, rank, and service number. But Rashid's words suggested something that her briefings hadn't covered: the possibility that the Iranian forces were also engaged against the unknown aircraft. The tactical situation might be more complex than anyone in the American command structure realized. The helicopter turned toward the Iranian coast, its pilot maintaining low altitude to avoid detection by American surveillance systems. Ghost watched the ocean pass beneath them, noting landmarks that might be useful for navigation if she managed to escape. The training that had seemed academic in the classroom was now a matter of life and death. "Captain," Rashid continued, We monitored your engagement with the unknown aircraft. Your performance was impressive. You managed to destroy 2 aircraft that our forces had been unable to engage effectively. This suggests that your technology and training are superior to our own. Ghost's mind raced as she processed this information. The Iranians had been monitoring her battle, which meant they had detailed intelligence on American capabilities. More importantly, they had been unable to engage the unknown aircraft, suggesting that the threat was beyond their ability to handle. Her capture might be less about intelligence gathering and more about finding a solution to a mutual problem. The coastline appeared ahead, a barren landscape of cliffs and rocky beaches that offered no hope of escape. Ghost realized that she was about to enter a phase of her captivity that would test every aspect of her training and character. The next few hours would determine whether she would be treated as a prisoner of war or something far worse. The helicopter settled onto a concrete landing pad surrounded by military vehicles and armed soldiers. Ghost could see that the facility was designed for high-value prisoners, with security measures that would make escape virtually impossible. As the rotors wound down, she prepared herself for whatever lay ahead, knowing that her survival would depend on her ability to adapt to circumstances that no training could fully prepare her for. The interrogation facility was a masterpiece of psychological warfare, designed to break down a prisoner's resistance through a combination of isolation, disorientation, and carefully applied pressure. Ghost found herself in a windowless room with fluorescent lighting that never turned off, its constant buzz creating a background noise that made concentration difficult. The temperature was kept uncomfortably warm, and the walls were painted an institutional green that seemed to absorb hope. Colonel Rashid entered the room after Ghost had been left alone for what felt like hours but might have been minutes. Her internal clock was already beginning to drift, a common effect of isolation that her captors were undoubtedly counting on. Rashid wore the uniform of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, but his manner suggested education and sophistication that went beyond military training. "Captain Nakamura," he began, settling into a chair across from her, "I hope you understand that we have no desire to harm you. Your capture was a matter of tactical necessity, not personal animosity." Ghost maintained her silence, focusing on the techniques she'd learned during SEER training. Survival, evasion, resistance, and escape, the 4 pillars that might keep her alive in this situation. She concentrated on maintaining her mental discipline, knowing that every word she spoke would be analyzed for intelligence value. "We know about your father," Rashid continued, consulting a file that seemed surprisingly thick. "Colonel James Nakamura, Korean War veteran. He taught you to fly, didn't he? We have photographs of you in his aircraft when you were 12 years old." The personal information was meant to unsettle her, to demonstrate that her captors knew more about her than she might expect. Ghost realized that Iranian intelligence had compiled a comprehensive dossier on her, which suggested that her capture hadn't been as random as it appeared. "Your silence is understandable," Rashid said, leaning back in his chair. "But consider this, we both face the same threat. Those aircraft you engaged, they're not American and they're not Iranian. They represent a third party that poses a danger to both our nations." Ghost's mind processed this information, comparing it to her tactical observations during the engagement. The unknown aircraft had demonstrated technology that was clearly beyond current American capabilities, but their attack patterns had suggested human pilots rather than automated systems. The question was whether Rashid was telling the truth or attempting to manipulate her. "We've been tracking these aircraft for several months," Rashid continued, "but we lack the technical capability to engage them effectively. Your performance suggests that American technology might be more effective, but we need to understand your tactics and procedures." The colonel stood and walked to a wall-mounted display, activating a screen that showed satellite imagery of the engagement area. Ghost could see the debris field where her aircraft had gone down, along with the scattered remnants of the unknown aircraft she destroyed. The imagery was detailed enough to show individual pieces of wreckage, suggesting Iranian surveillance capabilities that were more sophisticated than American intelligence had estimated. "Captain, we have a proposition for you. Share your knowledge of these aircraft and we will share ours. Together, we might be able to develop a defense against this threat." Ghost's training warned her against any cooperation with enemy forces, but the tactical situation was unlike anything covered in her briefings. If the unknown aircraft represented a threat to both American and Iranian forces, then traditional definitions of enemy and ally might not apply. She needed more information before making any decisions. "Your technology allowed you to achieve missile lock on these aircraft," Rashid said, returning to his seat. "Our systems cannot even detect them consistently. This suggests that your electronic warfare capabilities are significantly more advanced than our own." The admission of technological inferiority was surprising, given Iran's reputation for defensive systems. Ghost realized that Rashid was revealing more than he might intend, suggesting that the unknown aircraft posed a threat significant enough to overcome national security concerns. "We believe these aircraft are operated by a non-state actor," Rashid continued, "possibly a terrorist organization with access to advanced technology. Their attacks have targeted both American and Iranian vessels, suggesting that they consider us both enemies." Ghost's tactical mind began to process the implications. If the unknown aircraft were indeed operated by a third party, then her engagement had been part of a larger conflict that her command structure might not fully understand. The interdiction mission had been a cover for something far more complex, and she had been placed in the middle of it without proper intelligence support. "Captain," Rashid said, leaning forward, "we know you're trained to resist interrogation, but consider the possibility that cooperation might serve your country's interests better than resistance. These aircraft pose a threat that transcends national boundaries." The psychological pressure was subtle but effective. Rashid was offering her a way to rationalize cooperation by framing it as service to her country rather than betrayal. Ghost recognized the technique, but found herself considering the possibility that he might be telling the truth. The door opened, and a young officer entered carrying a tray of food and water. The meal was simple but adequate: rice, vegetables, and what appeared to be chicken prepared in a Middle Eastern style. Ghost realized that she was being treated according to the Geneva Convention, at least for now, which suggested that her captors wanted her cooperation rather than just her information. "Eat," Rashid said, his tone becoming more conversational. "You'll need your strength for what lies ahead." Ghost accepted the food, knowing that maintaining her physical condition was essential for any escape attempt. As she ate, she considered her options, all of which seemed to lead toward an uncertain future. The intelligence she carried was valuable, but using it might require cooperation with forces that her training defined as enemies. "We have a common enemy," Rashid said, watching her eat. "Perhaps it's time to consider a common response." Ghost finished her meal in silence, but her mind was already working on the problem of how to turn her captivity to her advantage. The Iranian colonel had revealed more than he intended, and she was beginning to understand that her situation was more complex than a simple prisoner of war scenario. The next phase of her captivity would test every aspect of her training, but Ghost was beginning to see possibilities that hadn't existed when she first ejected from her aircraft. The question was whether she could exploit those possibilities without compromising her oath as an American officer. The intelligence briefing that followed was unlike anything in Ghost's experience. Colonel Rashid led her through a series of secure corridors to a facility that clearly served as Iran's primary intelligence analysis center for the region. The walls were lined with displays showing satellite imagery, radar tracks, and communication intercepts that painted a picture of an ongoing conflict that her own command structure had either missed or chosen not to share. "Captain," Rashid said, gesturing toward a large display showing the Persian Gulf region, "what you see here represents 6 months of intelligence gathering. These aircraft have been operating throughout the region, attacking targets that seem to follow no logical pattern." Ghost studied the display, noting the locations of various incidents marked with red symbols. The pattern was indeed puzzling. Attacks on Iranian oil facilities, American shipping, and even Chinese vessels suggested an adversary with no clear national affiliation. Her tactical mind began to process the implications, comparing what she was seeing with her own engagement experience. "The aircraft you fought were part of a larger fleet," Rashid continued, activating additional displays that showed estimated force compositions and deployment patterns. "We believe they operate from mobile platforms, possibly converted merchant vessels that can relocate to avoid detection." The intelligence was sophisticated, demonstrating Iranian capabilities that exceeded American estimates. Ghost realized that her captors possessed information that would be invaluable to her own intelligence services, creating a complex situation where mutual cooperation might benefit both sides. "Your electronic warfare systems were able to achieve missile lock where ours could not," Rashid said, turning to face her directly. "This suggests that your technology operates on frequencies or using methods that these aircraft cannot counter effectively." Ghost's training warned her against revealing technical capabilities, but the tactical situation demanded adaptation. If the unknown aircraft posed a threat to both American and Iranian forces, then traditional security protocols might need to be reconsidered. The question was whether she could share enough information to be useful without compromising critical secrets. "We know about your father's service in Korea," Rashid said, his tone becoming more personal. "He flew against MiGs that were technologically superior to his own aircraft, but he achieved success through superior tactics and training. Perhaps his daughter can do the same." The reference to her father was clearly meant to establish a connection, but Ghost found herself considering the parallel. Her father had indeed faced superior technology and found ways to overcome it through innovation and determination. The same principles might apply to her current situation. "The aircraft you engaged demonstrated capabilities that our scientists cannot explain," Rashid continued, activating a display that showed detailed analysis of the wreckage recovery. "Their materials are unlike anything in our databases, and their propulsion systems seem to operate on principles we don't understand." Ghost studied the analysis, noting details that matched her own observations during the engagement. The aircraft had indeed demonstrated performance characteristics that seemed to defy conventional physics, but they had still been vulnerable to well-placed gunfire. The technology might be advanced, but it wasn't invincible. "We believe these aircraft are prototypes," Rashid said, "possibly stolen or captured from a research facility. Their operators seem to be testing them in combat conditions, using our region as a proving ground." The theory made tactical sense, explaining why the aircraft had demonstrated such advanced capabilities while still being vulnerable to conventional weapons. Ghost began to see patterns in the engagement that she hadn't recognized at the time, tactical mistakes that suggested pilots who were still learning their aircraft's capabilities. "Captain," Rashid said, leaning forward, "we need your help to develop countermeasures. Your engagement was the first time anyone has successfully destroyed one of these aircraft. Your tactics and observations could be the key to defending against future attacks." Ghost's mind raced through the possibilities. If she could share her tactical knowledge while gathering intelligence on Iranian capabilities, she might be able to serve her country's interests even while in captivity. The challenge was finding a way to cooperate without violating her oath as an American officer. "We're prepared to facilitate your return to American forces," Rashid said, but only after we've developed a joint response to this threat. Your knowledge is too valuable to lose, and our intelligence is too important to ignore." The offer was tempting, but Ghost recognized it as a form of coercion disguised as cooperation. Her captors were offering her freedom in exchange for her knowledge, but the terms would be set by them rather than by any formal agreement between nations. She needed to find a way to turn the situation to her advantage. "We know you're trained to resist interrogation," Rashid said, his tone becoming more direct. "But this isn't traditional interrogation. We're offering you a chance to serve your country's interests while protecting both our nations from a common threat." Ghost realized that she was facing a decision that would define the rest of her career. Cooperation might serve the greater good, but it would also violate every principle of her training. The question was whether she could find a middle ground that would allow her to gather intelligence while appearing to cooperate. "Think about it," Rashid said, standing to leave. "We'll continue this conversation tomorrow." As the door closed behind him, Ghost was left alone with her thoughts and the weight of a decision that would impact far more than her own fate. The intelligence she had gathered during her engagement was valuable, but the information she was being offered might be even more important. The challenge was finding a way to use both without compromising her principles or her country's security. The night passed slowly in the windowless cell, giving Ghost time to process everything she had learned. The unknown aircraft represented a threat that transcended national boundaries, but her captor's offer of cooperation came with strings attached that could compromise her integrity as an American officer. She needed to find a way to serve her country's interests while maintaining her principles, a challenge that would test every aspect of her training and character. The morning brought a new development that would change everything. Colonel Rashid entered her cell with an expression that suggested urgency, his usual composed demeanor replaced by something approaching concern. Behind him followed a young officer carrying a tablet displaying what appeared to be fresh intelligence reports. "Captain," Rashid said without preamble, "we've received word that the unknown aircraft have launched a major offensive. They attacked an American carrier battle group 12 hours ago, and our own naval forces are under assault as we speak." Ghost's blood ran cold as she processed the implications. The unknown aircraft had escalated from isolated attacks to full-scale warfare, targeting the most powerful military assets in the region. Her engagement had been just the beginning of something far more serious than anyone had anticipated. "The USS Constellation has been severely damaged," Rashid continued, consulting the tablet. "Casualties are estimated in the hundreds, and several escorts have been sunk or disabled. Your carrier aviation wing has been decimated." The news hit Ghost like a physical blow. The Constellation was her home, her squadron mates were her family, and the thought of them under attack while she sat in captivity filled her with rage and helplessness. She realized that her capture had removed her from the battle when her skills were most needed. "Our own forces have fared no better," Rashid admitted, his tone carrying genuine concern. "The Bandar Abba's naval base has been attacked, and we've lost several vessels attempting to intercept the hostile aircraft. The technology gap is even greater than we estimated." Ghost studied Rashid's expression, noting the signs of stress and fatigue that suggested he was telling the truth. The unknown aircraft had achieved tactical surprise against both American and Iranian forces, demonstrating capabilities that neither side had been prepared to counter. The regional balance of power had shifted overnight. "This changes everything," Rashid said, pulling up a chair. "We're no longer dealing with isolated attacks or terrorist incidents. This is organized warfare by a force with advanced technology and significant resources." Ghost's tactical mind began to process the new situation. If the unknown aircraft had the capability to engage multiple carrier battle groups simultaneously, then they represented a threat that required immediate and coordinated response. Her knowledge of their capabilities and tactics had become even more valuable, but so had Iranian intelligence on their operations. "Captain," Rashid said, leaning forward, "we need to share information immediately. Both our forces are being destroyed while we maintain traditional security protocols. The time for national rivalry has passed." The urgency in his voice suggested that this wasn't a negotiating tactic, but a genuine recognition of the threat they faced. Ghost realized that her captivity had become secondary to the larger conflict, and her value as an intelligence asset had increased dramatically. The question was whether she could leverage that value to serve her country's interests. "We're prepared to establish direct communication with your command structure," Rashid continued, "but we need your cooperation to validate our intelligence and ensure that joint operations are possible." Ghost's training had never covered a situation like this, where cooperation with enemy forces might be essential for national survival. The traditional definitions of friend and foe were blurring in the face of a threat that neither side could handle alone. She needed to find a way to serve her country while adapting to circumstances that no manual had anticipated. "We know you have information about these aircraft that could save lives," Rashid said, his tone becoming more personal. "Your squadron mates, your ship's crew, they're dying while we debate the finer points of military protocol." The emotional appeal was effective because it was true. Ghost's knowledge of the unknown aircraft's capabilities and tactics could help develop countermeasures that might save American lives. The question was whether she could share that knowledge without compromising other secrets that might be equally important. "We're willing to arrange a secure communication link with your command structure," Rashid offered, "but only if you're willing to facilitate the exchange of tactical intelligence. Both our nations need to understand what we're facing." Ghost realized that she was being offered an opportunity to serve her country while in captivity, but the terms would require her to violate traditional security protocols. The decision would define not only her own fate, but potentially the outcome of a conflict that was rapidly expanding beyond anyone's control. "I need guarantees," Ghost said, breaking her silence for the first time since her capture. "If I'm going to facilitate intelligence sharing, I need assurance that American personnel will be protected and that any cooperation will be temporary." Rashid's expression showed relief mixed with respect. "You have my word as an officer that any cooperation will be strictly limited to the current crisis. Once the threat is neutralized, normal protocols will resume." Ghost studied his face, looking for signs of deception but finding only the fatigue and concern of someone facing an unprecedented situation. The decision she was about to make would have consequences that extended far beyond her own fate, but the alternative might be the destruction of both American and Iranian forces. "I'll need to speak with my command structure directly," Ghost said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "If they authorize cooperation, I'll share what I know, but I won't act without explicit orders from my superiors." Rashid nodded, understanding the significance of her decision. "We'll arrange the communication link immediately. Captain, I hope you understand that this conversation could determine the fate of both our nations." Ghost understood all too well. She was about to participate in something that would either save thousands of lives or compromise her integrity as an American officer. The next few hours would test every aspect of her training and character, but she was beginning to see a path forward that might serve both her country's interests and her own conscience. The secure communication link was established within hours, connecting Ghost to the Pentagon's Emergency Operations Center through a series of encrypted relays that neither side fully trusted but both recognized as necessary. The voice that emerged from the speakers was that of Admiral Patricia Hayes, the Chief of Naval Operations, her tone carrying the weight of command decisions that would shape the conflict's outcome. "Captain Nakamura," Admiral Hayes began, her voice clear despite the electronic distortion, We've been monitoring your situation through intelligence channels. I need to know your status and the circumstances of your capture." Ghost provided a concise report of her engagement with the unknown aircraft, her ejection, and subsequent capture by Iranian forces. She emphasized the tactical capabilities she had observed and the intelligence that Colonel Rashid had shared, painting a picture of a threat that transcended national boundaries. "Admiral," Ghost concluded, "the Iranians possess intelligence on these aircraft that could be valuable to our forces. They're requesting tactical cooperation to develop countermeasures against a mutual threat." The pause that followed lasted several seconds, during which Ghost could hear muted conversations in the background. The decision to cooperate with Iranian forces, even temporarily, would require authorization at the highest levels of government, but time was running out as the unknown aircraft continued their offensive. "Captain," Admiral Hayes said finally, "you're authorized to share tactical intelligence relating to the unknown aircraft, but you are not to reveal any information about American capabilities or procedures beyond what's necessary to counter the immediate threat." Ghost felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had been given official authorization to cooperate, but the boundaries of that cooperation were unclear. The challenge would be sharing enough information to be useful without compromising secrets that might be vital to long-term national security. "Furthermore," Admiral Hayes continued, "you're to gather as much intelligence as possible on Iranian capabilities and intentions. This cooperation is temporary and limited to the current crisis. Once the threat is neutralized, normal security protocols will resume." Colonel Rashid, who had been listening to the conversation, stepped forward. "Admiral Hayes, this is Colonel Rashid of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. We appreciate your willingness to cooperate in the face of this mutual threat." "Colonel," Admiral Hayes replied, her tone neutral but professional, "we're prepared to share tactical intelligence and coordinate defensive operations, but this cooperation is strictly limited to the current crisis. Any attempt to exploit this arrangement for other purposes will result in immediate termination of all cooperation." Rashid nodded, understanding the terms of the unprecedented agreement. "Understood, Admiral. We're prepared to share our intelligence on the unknown aircraft and coordinate our response to their offensive." Ghost realized that she was witnessing history in the making. Two nations that had been adversaries for decades were cooperating against a common threat. The implications extended far beyond the immediate crisis, potentially reshaping the balance of power in the region. "Captain Nakamura," Admiral Hayes said, "you're to serve as our liaison for this operation. Your knowledge of these aircraft and your position with Iranian forces make you uniquely qualified to facilitate cooperation." Ghost understood the weight of the responsibility she was being given. She would be the primary conduit for intelligence sharing between two nations that had minimal trust in each other, and her decisions could determine the success or failure of joint operations against an unprecedented threat. "We've prepared a comprehensive briefing on the unknown aircraft," Rashid said, activating a display that showed the full scope of Iranian intelligence gathering. "Captain Nakamura's tactical observations have helped us understand their capabilities and limitations." The briefing that followed was remarkable in its scope and detail. Iranian intelligence had tracked the unknown aircraft for months, documenting their operations, analyzing their technology, and developing theories about their origins and objectives. The information was far more comprehensive than anything American intelligence had compiled. "We believe these aircraft are operated by a private military organization," Rashid explained, "possibly funded by a state actor, but operating independently to maintain plausible deniability. Their objective appears to be destabilizing the region through attacks on both American and Iranian forces." Ghost absorbed the information, comparing it to her own observations and tactical experience. The theory made sense, explaining the aircraft's advanced technology and their operators' apparent independence from any national command structure. The challenge was developing countermeasures against technology that seemed to operate beyond conventional physics. The key to their defense seems to be their electronic warfare capabilities, Ghost observed, sharing her tactical analysis. They can defeat radar-guided missiles, but they're vulnerable to infrared seekers and cannon fire at close range. Admiral Hayes's voice carried newfound interest. Captain, can you elaborate on their electronic warfare systems? Any technical details could be crucial for developing countermeasures. Ghost provided a detailed analysis of her engagement, describing how the unknown aircraft had defeated her AIM-120 missiles while being vulnerable to her AIM-9 Sidewinder at close range. The information was technical but accessible, providing insights that could help develop new tactical approaches. We've observed similar vulnerabilities, Rashid added, but our forces lack the technology to exploit them effectively. American electronic warfare capabilities appear to be more advanced than our own. The admission was significant, representing a level of openness that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. Ghost realized that the crisis had created opportunities for cooperation that might not exist once the immediate threat was resolved. Admiral, Ghost said, I recommend establishing a joint operations center to coordinate our response. The Iranians have intelligence we need, and we have technology they require. Combined operations might be our best chance of success. Admiral Hayes's response was immediate. Agreed. We'll begin coordinating joint operations immediately. Captain, you're to serve as our primary liaison and provide tactical guidance for combined operations. Ghost understood that she was being given a role that would define the rest of her career. She would be the bridge between two nations that had been enemies, facilitating cooperation that could determine the outcome of an unprecedented conflict. The challenge would be maintaining her integrity while serving her country's interests in circumstances that no training had prepared her for. The Joint Operations Center, established in the Iranian facility, represented an unprecedented level of cooperation between forces that had been adversaries for decades. Ghost found herself at the center of a command structure that combined American technological capabilities with Iranian regional intelligence, creating a hybrid organization that neither side fully trusted but both recognized as necessary. The center's main display showed the current tactical situation, with American and Iranian forces marked in different colors, while the unknown aircraft appeared as red symbols moving through the region with apparent impunity. The scope of the offensive was staggering. Simultaneous attacks on naval forces, air bases, and civilian infrastructure suggested an organization with significant resources and sophisticated planning capabilities. Captain, Admiral Hayes's voice came through the communication link. We're tracking at least 30 of these aircraft operating throughout the region. They're using tactics that suggest centralized command and control, which means there's a headquarters or command ship somewhere in the area. Ghost studied the tactical display, noting the patterns of movement and attack timing that suggested coordinated operations. Her experience as a naval aviator helped her recognize the signs of carrier-based operations, but the aircraft's performance characteristics ruled out any conventional platform. Admiral, Ghost replied, the coordination suggests they're operating from a mobile platform, possibly a converted merchant vessel or purpose-built carrier. Their attack patterns indicate they can launch and recover aircraft quickly, which rules out land-based operations. Colonel Rashid activated additional displays showing Iranian surveillance data from the past week. We've been tracking several suspicious vessels in international waters, but none matched the profile of a conventional aircraft carrier. However, we may have been looking for the wrong type of platform. The intelligence was revealing a picture of an adversary that operated by different rules than conventional military forces. Ghost realized that traditional tactics and strategies might be ineffective against an organization that could field advanced technology while maintaining operational security that defeated both American and Iranian intelligence services. "We need to change our approach," Ghost said, addressing both Admiral Hayes and Colonel Rashid. "These aircraft are vulnerable to close-range engagement, but we need to get our fighters within effective range without being detected." Admiral Hayes's response carried a note of frustration. "Captain, we've lost 6 aircraft attempting to intercept these hostiles. Their electronic warfare capabilities are defeating our beyond visual range missiles, and their performance allows them to evade close-range engagement." Ghost considered the tactical problem, drawing on her experience and the intelligence she had gathered. The unknown aircraft's advantages were significant, but they weren't insurmountable. The key was finding a way to negate their technological superiority through superior tactics and coordination. "Admiral," Ghost said, "I recommend using Iranian airspace for staging operations. Their radar coverage and surface-to-air missiles could provide early warning and protection for our aircraft during approach." The suggestion was tactically sound but politically sensitive. Using Iranian airspace would require a level of cooperation that went beyond simple intelligence sharing, potentially setting precedents that could complicate future relations. "Colonel Rashid," Admiral Hayes said after a brief pause, "would your government authorize American aircraft to operate from Iranian airspace for the duration of this crisis?" Rashid's response came quickly, suggesting that authorization had already been discussed at higher levels. "Admiral, we're prepared to provide basing rights and air defense coverage for American aircraft engaged in operations against the unknown hostiles. This authorization is limited to the current crisis and will be terminated once the threat is neutralized." Ghost realized that she was witnessing the formation of a military alliance that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. The unknown aircraft had achieved something that decades of diplomacy had failed to accomplish, forcing two adversaries to cooperate against a common threat. "We'll need to coordinate our electronic warfare capabilities," Ghost continued, developing the tactical plan in real time. Iranian surface-to-air missiles could force the unknown aircraft to lower altitudes, where American fighters could engage them more effectively. The plan was ambitious but feasible, combining Iranian defensive capabilities with American offensive technology. Ghost found herself serving as more than just a liaison. She was becoming a tactical planner for joint operations that could determine the outcome of the conflict. "Captain," Admiral Hayes said, "we're preparing to deploy a carrier strike group to support joint operations. You'll coordinate with Iranian forces to establish the tactical parameters for combined operations." Ghost understood the significance of the deployment. American carriers operating in conjunction with Iranian forces represented a level of cooperation that would have strategic implications extending far beyond the current crisis. The decisions made in the next few hours would shape regional politics for decades to come. "Admiral," Ghost replied, "I recommend establishing a joint command structure with clearly defined roles and responsibilities. The Iranians have excellent intelligence capabilities, and we have superior technology. Combined effectively, we might be able to turn the tide of this conflict." Colonel Rashid nodded his agreement. "Captain Nakamura's assessment is correct. Neither of our forces can defeat this threat alone, but combined operations might provide the capability we need." Ghost realized that her role had evolved from prisoner to liaison to tactical planner, but the next phase would test her abilities even further. The joint operations would require her to coordinate between forces that had different procedures, equipment, and cultural approaches to warfare. The challenge would be creating unity of command while maintaining the trust of both sides. "We'll begin joint operations at first light," Admiral Hayes announced. "Captain, You're to coordinate the initial strikes while providing tactical guidance for follow-on operations. Ghost understood that she was being given command responsibility for operations that could determine the fate of both nations. The weight of that responsibility was enormous, but she also felt the confidence that came from knowing she had the support of both American and Iranian forces. The unknown aircraft had superior technology, but they were about to face a combination of capabilities that they might not be prepared to counter. The pre-dawn hours brought a tension that Ghost had never experienced, even during her most challenging combat missions. The Joint Operations Center hummed with activity as American and Iranian officers worked side by side, their traditional animosity temporarily set aside in the face of a common threat. The tactical displays showed friendly forces converging on the target area, but Ghost knew that the unknown aircraft's capabilities made success far from certain. Captain, Admiral Hayes's voice carried the weight of command decisions that would determine the outcome of the operation. We're tracking a concentration of hostile aircraft approximately 200 miles southeast of your position. Intelligence suggests this might be their primary operating base. Ghost studied the tactical display, noting the formation of contacts that suggested a mobile platform surrounded by defensive aircraft. The target was heavily defended, but it represented the best opportunity to strike at the heart of the enemy's operations. Admiral, Ghost replied, I recommend a coordinated strike using Iranian surface-to-air missiles to force the hostiles to lower altitudes, followed by close-range engagement by American fighters. The combination should negate their electronic warfare advantages. Colonel Rashid activated additional displays showing Iranian missile coverage and the timing required for effective coordination. Captain, our SAM sites are prepared to engage on your command. We can provide coverage for your aircraft during approach and withdrawal. The level of cooperation required was unprecedented, demanding precise timing and communication between forces that had never worked together. Ghost realized that she was coordinating not just a military operation, but a diplomatic breakthrough that could reshape the region's balance of power. All stations, this is Ghost, she announced on the tactical frequency. We're initiating Operation Sandstorm. Iranian SAM sites will engage hostile aircraft at 6:30 hours, followed by American fighter sweep at